There are at least 3 ways to build most EDH decks.
Strong.
Fun, 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 fun. And mean. Let's talk about the strong, fun, and mean ways that I would build Obuun, Mul Daya Ancestor. And the video starts right now. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. I am Joel. We're going to talk about Obuun, Mul Daya Ancestor, and the strong, fun, and mean ways that I would build this deck in EDH. But first, if you liked the video by the end of it, go down there, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. And while you're down there, drop a comment and let me know which commander you want me to build 3 ways. Maybe you'll see it in an upcoming video. Let's jump over into this commander. So we've got Obuun, Mul Daya Ancestor here. We got Naya, 1 white, 1 green, 1 red, 1 other for a legendary elf spirit. It's a 3/3, and it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, up to 1 target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is Obuun's power. It's still a land. It also has a landfall ability that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So you could target Obuun with that. You could target your lands and make them even bigger rather. You could target, any of your other creatures if you wanted to. But I do have a strong, fun, and mean way to build this. Strong, we're going to focus on Obuun's power. We're going to raise that power as much as possible so that every turn we're making a land into an XX with trample and haste, where X is our commander's power. For the fun way, we're going to play this sort of a landfall trampling build so that we can landfall as many times as possible and just grow 1 big trampling creature every turn. And the mean way, we're going to build it board wipe and destruction in a version I'm calling Nature's Wrath. Let's get into the strong way. So the strong way, we want to focus on Obuun's power. We want to grow that power as much as possible, so that ability to have a target land become an XX, where X is our commander's power with trample until end of turn. We triggered the biggest possible return for that we can. So let's start with cards like Xenagos. It's that bottom bit of text that we care about with this creature. At the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains haste and gets XX until end of turn, where X is that creature's power. So we're effectively, just with this 1 card alone, going to be able to double Obuun's power, and we will get a 6/6 trampling land that can attack on our turn. Now, if we can raise up the power at all, then apply Xenagos' trigger at the beginning of our combat, we get that much more return. So how about Naya? We'd be able to dump mana, that bottom ability, dump any mana we have left over into raising the power of target creature, Obuun in this case, until end of turn. So for just 4 mana, Naya is going to make it a 5/5, and then we can dump past that, do that with all of the extra mana that we've got, and then hopefully also double it with Xenagos. We've also got some more humble ways of doing this as well. Domri, creatures you control get +1/+0. Boom, we're going to get a great passive to make it a 4/3, so we're making 4/4 lands right off the rip, and we get the residual effect of a +1 that adds mana and makes our creatures uncounterable, and a -2 that is a removal, essentially, especially in this deck. Fight is going to be hugely useful in this deck. We can also do it with Ronus. This is another mana dump version of that. Pay 3, target creature gets +2 and gains trample until end of turn, so it makes it a 5 right off the rip. We get 5/5 for our creature, and we're off to the races with attackers. I thought this creature was very interesting when I was researching this commander. Moonveiled Dragon, red, 3 for a flyer, 5/5. That for just 1 red will give each creature you control Flamethrower, essentially. This is an old ability called Flamethrower. 1 red, each creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Talk about a mana dump here. Before we go into that phase where it checks the beginning of combat on your turn, where Obuun's ability triggers, we want to pump that power on Obuun as much as we've got red mana to do it. Make a big land creature, because we can just throw our land creatures. They've got trample. We want them to get across any damage that they possibly can, and we're comfortable with losing them because we're going to run a lot of lands as well, and we know that our lands are, that's a loss that we can stomach. We're just going to keep swinging in with giant trampling lands and dealing as much damage as quickly as we possibly can as well. Moonveil Dragon's a great way to have a repeated effect. Cavalier Flame does the same kind of thing, but it also gives our creatures haste on the trigger as well. 1 red, 1 other, creatures you control get +1/+0, so Flamethrower again, and gain haste until end of turn. Cavalier is a fantastic creature outside of that, but we want to use it specifically for that ability. That's so good. How are some other ways we can do this? We've seen some creatures, some enchantment kind of things with Xenagos. How about with an equipment? We've got Black Blade Reforged. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control, so that's pretty synergistic in a deck that's going to have some landfall, that's going to be concentrating on getting a lot of lands out so that we can just start throwing lands at people's face. How about equipping legendary creature, Obuun in this case, for just 3? And making that power that much bigger. Every land will contribute to a higher power on this commander. I think that could actually have some viability. We've also got cards like Loxodon Warhammer, +3/+0 trample and lifelink for just a 3-cost equipment that attaches for 3. This is a great way to make 6/6 lands every single turn. Plus you've got a commander that if you want to, you can swing with. It'll be a 6/3 lifelinking trampler just like that. Not a bad way to, not a bad way to equip your commander up, especially when you're landfalling, putting more counters on Obuun, because we do have that built-in ability to raise the power with landfall triggers. Rancor is very good in this deck, y'all. It's just an enchantment, a little 1-mana enchantment aura, but it returns to your hand every time it's put into the graveyard, so you get to use it over and over again. So essentially we just get a free 2-power increase on Obuun that makes our lands 5/5s at the beginning, our land 5/5 at the beginning of our turn, combat on our turn, so that we can just keep punching in and throwing lands, like I said. Here's an enchantment we can also do it on. Whenever a creature you control attacks, put a quest counter on it, and as long as it has 7 or more quest counters on it, creatures you control get 5/5. Booyah, that's double the pleasure, double the fun. We've got Obuun now at 8 power, so it's making an 8/8 elemental creature token out of our land, an elemental creature out of our land, and that 8/8 land is also getting +5/+5, so we're swinging for 13/13 total, and it's just an absolute beatdown with our trampling lands. And speaking of lands, we can also do this with a land, Kessig Wolverun. 1 green, 1 red, X, tap it, target creature gets +X/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. So we just make Obuun as big as we have mana for and still have a land untapped so that we can make that land our giant attacker with trample. Swing through, send that swamp, or it's not going to be a swamp with this deck, send that mountain or that forest right at their face. That's the strong way that I would build Obuun. Let's talk about the fun way, and that is with a landfall deck. Landfall deck has to start with Oracle and Mul Daya. We want to maximize the amount of landfall triggers that we get per turn with this build strategy. This is probably one you're, overall going to want to combine the strong, fun, and mean ways into one very good deck. But Obuun definitely wants multiple landfall triggers because he does have that ability built in to grow his own power, which is great for us. Oracle and Mul Daya is always a great starting place for a landfall deck. 1 green, 3 other. You can play an additional land on each of your turns, play with the top card revealed, and you can play the top card of your library if it's a land. This is everything we want. This is hopefully at least 2 landfall triggers per turn, making Obuun a 5/5 right out of the gate. Or as quickly as possible anyway, so that we're making 5/5 trampling lands and we're punching in. There's also more humble ways to do this. Colony Heart Expedition represents that. 1 green, 1 other. Landfall, you get a quest counter on it. When it's got 3 quest counters on it, you sack it, go get 2 basic lands, put them right onto the battlefield tapped. So just with Colony Heart Expedition, achieving its 3 quest counters, we're going to get 2 landfall triggers off 1 sack just like that, turning Obuun again into that 5/5 or up to a 7/7 if we've already gone double on the landfall triggers there. We're going to get to add it immediately. That's what we want, at least 2 lands coming in per turn. Cultivate's another great example of that. It's a classic, you know it, but you get 1 immediately onto the battlefield, so that'll be in addition to your landfall trigger that you've already played for land for turn, hopefully, and you get a land into your hand, guaranteeing you're at least getting 1 landfall trigger the next turn. Cultivate's fantastic. Sear's Sundial, problem with the deck like this is that it's going to run out of momentum, and you want to be able to keep cards in your hand. So Sear's Sundial gives us the passive of landfall that every time it happens we can pay 2 and draw a card every time we're playing a land. So that's a way to keep our hand full and keep those lands in our hand, or keep whatever spells we've built into the deck just coming, and we've got resources coming. Courser Crew Fix is sort of like Oracle of Mul Daya, green 1, play with the top card of the library revealed. You can play the top card if it's a land card, and whenever a land enters the battlefield, you get a nice residual of a life on the landfall trigger. Not that huge of a deal. It's those first two that we really like about Courser, is that it's going to let us essentially to filter the lands off the top of our library so that we're only drawing heat every turn. Migration Path, it's got cycling, so if you don't need it, you can get rid of it, but for 4 mana, you can go get 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. You've also got cards like Circuitous Route. Circuitous Route will let you go search for basics or for gates as well, so you can get lands that tap for 2 different color of mana. But this kind of card is what you want to be running in this deck for sure. Boundless Realms is a great card. 7 cost to search your library for up to X basic lands, where X is the number of lands you control, and put them onto the battlefield tapped. This is the kind of one that can give you a huge turn. You know, Obuun, you go find 9, 10 basic lands all at once, dump them onto the battlefield. That's a ton of triggers on Obuun, and we're getting a huge land with trample that turn, ready to attack an opponent. This is the kind of card that can really make the game get out of hand. Traverse the Outlands is actually a card that I strangely wasn't aware of. It had just skipped me for some reason completely, but I found it when I was researching this video. 1 green, 4 other sorcery. Search your library for up to X basic lands, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Then put those cards onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. I mean, this could be huge. If you have a 5 power creature on the battlefield, for 5 mana, you get to go search for up to 5 basic lands, where 5 is the greatest power among creatures you control. Put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. This card is a house. This card is fantastic. This is, again, a card that can lead you to having just an absolutely bonkers turn with a huge attacker seemingly out of nowhere, and then you have the residual effect of having all of that extra land on the battlefield ready to cast huge spells the next turn, which we could put all that mana into a Genesis Wave. Green, X, reveal the top X cards of your library, put any number of permanent cards, including lands, with converted mana cost X or less, because CMC on a land is 0, from among them onto the battlefield. Then all the cards revealed this way that weren't put on the battlefield go into your graveyard. But this is, again, the kind of one you can dump all your extra mana into it, plus your 3 green mana, and get this huge turn that puts a ton of counters on Obuun or any creature that you really want him to go on. And then we're creating a huge land, hopefully with trample, that can attack. All those landfall triggers, this is exactly what you want to be doing with a deck like this. Scapeshift is another example of that. Sack any number of lands, search your library for that many land cards, any land cards you can go and get just automatically. Put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. So what this means is possibly you can play this for 4, have 10 mana on the battlefield, sack all 10, go get 10 more lands, have 10 landfall triggers from Obuun, swing in for huge with maybe you left one behind, maybe you got one somehow, you're untapping it with another ability you've got. But not only are you then tutoring up the exact lands that you need, maybe you need some utility lands, maybe you need some different colors, whatever, but you're getting all of these landfall triggers. Scapeshift is an absolute house in this. I also ran Sword of the Animist in this deck. I really like how it grows the power of Obuun, like we talked about in the strong section, so we get that box checked. Then whenever it attacks, you can search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library, so you get landfall triggers off of attacks. This is huge. It's only 2 to play, 2 to equip. This is exactly the kind of card that Obuun wants. I mean, it's literally called Sword of the Animist, and it is a sword for someone who is animating non-living things into being attacking creatures. That's exactly what we're going for. So that's the fun way that I would build it. Let's talk about the mean way and destroy everyone's stuff with Nature's Wrath. Essentially, the thought process here is a bunch of board wipes. Our lands are going to be our creatures, and so if we can make Obuun indestructible, or we can wipe the board right before we play Obuun and then pump him out of nowhere with a card like we looked at in the fun section, and then start swinging him with lands, there's not going to be any blockers to block those huge creatures, and so we're going to get to do a lot of damage kind of out of nowhere. Let's start with Austere Command. It's perfect. Choose 2. Destroy all artifacts, enchantments, creatures with CMC 3 or less, creatures with CMC 4 or greater. You can aim this in 2 different directions that you really need to deal with. Austere Command is fantastic. Cleansing Nova. Choose 1. Destroy all creatures or destroy all artifacts and enchantments. 5 mana. That's fantastic. We can aim it in whichever direction's the biggest problem, wipe all the creatures off the battlefield and start punching through with our own lands, or wipe all the artifacts and enchantments off the battlefield that are causing us problems. How about Akroma's Vengeance? 6 cost to destroy all of it. Artifacts, creatures, enchantments, all gone. And if we don't need it, we get it early and we're just not ready to do that, or we get it late and we've already cast a board wipe, cycle it for 3 and go get something else. Phyrexian Rebirth is kind of a funny card. It's a pet card of mine. I really love it because it came out in a set that I was playing very heavily. 2 white, 4 other to destroy all creatures. Then you get a creature left on the battlefield, an XX, where X is a number of creatures destroyed this way. It doesn't come with trample, and that's kind of a bummer. However, the fact that you get a huge, possibly a huge creature left on the battlefield after wiping everyone else's stuff away is pretty fantastic, especially if you're playing against a token strategy. I've seen Phyrexian Rebirth go off against a goblin deck that was like, hey, I'm sitting pretty on my 72 1/1, you know, goblin tokens over here, and I'm just like, Phyrexian Rebirth. And suddenly we're having a different conversation. Nevinyr's Disc is a way to do it as well. 4 costs for an artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped, but for just 1, it becomes this kill switch that you've just got sitting on the battlefield. Pay 1, tap it, all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Goodbye. You do have to let this untap if you don't have some specific way built in to untap an artifact automatically, something like Voltaic Key. However, this is a nice, I've always seen this as a good political card. I like playing it onto the battlefield, and it's just like, hey, don't screw with me, don't mess up any of my strategy, and I don't have to hit the kill switch and wipe everything off the battlefield. Planar Outburst is another one kind of like Phyrexian Rebirth. I like it because it can leave a creature behind, and it's sort of in line with our synergies here. 5 to destroy all non-land creatures, and we can cast it for 5, 6, 7, 8 total to destroy all non-land creatures and put 4+1/+1 counters on target land you control, and it becomes an elemental creature with haste. So we can target a land with Obuun that has the 4 counters on it and is already a creature, and that base power and toughness increases with those 4+1/+1 counters on top of that, and we've got a big trampling meanie with our boards completely cleared because of Planar Outburst. World Slayer is an interesting card because I like it in combination with Darksteel Plate, which we're going to go over in a couple of seconds. World Slayer, whenever a creature that's equipped does combat damage to a player, destroy all permanents other than World Slayer. So you have to have it suited up on a creature that has indestructible, because otherwise you're going to wipe everything off the board except for this one sword, and that's not really fun. We want it, like we say at Jake and Joel, we like cards like Armageddon, cards like World Slayer. However, they need to be in service of a win and not just to delay the inevitable or make the game go longer, because that's annoying. World Slayer, if you can get it suited up on the right creature, especially something with trample, and it's got Argentum armor, that's essentially, or Darksteel plate, excuse me, that is the kind of combo that can win you the game outright, because everyone's going to be struggling to catch back up. It destroys all permanents. That's lands too. World Slayer can set you up, and essentially you're just like, you've got this one creature with indestructible armor and the sword, and just floating in a void where everything else has been destroyed. Bane of Progress is an elemental creature for 6 that when it enters the battlefield destroys all artifacts and enchantments, and it gets a +1/+1 counter for each permanent destroyed this way. So it's one of those board wipey things that leaves something behind. I really like that. Magus of the Disc enters the battlefield tapped. It's sort of like a Nevinyr's Disc, but on a creature. It's a 2/4 for 4. Pay 1, tap it, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and elements. Enchantments. So you've got this creature version of a card that we already play, so we like redundancy. So with World Slayer, Avacyn Angel of Hope, 3+5 for an 8/8 flying Vigi, indestructible. Other permanents you control have indestructible. So if you can get World Slayer onto a creature and Avacyn is on the battlefield, you're essentially going to win if you can get at least 1 point of combat damage through, because it's going to wipe everything off of the board except for Avacyn, the sword, and the creature that's suited up. And because Avacyn says other permanents you control have indestructible, actually your lands would be left behind too. So the World Slayer would hit literally everyone but you. And that's pretty much game. That's when all your opponents are going into scoop phase, and you've pretty much got it locked up. Darksteel Plate, this is another way to make our stuff survive, make our Obuun survive a board wipe. Darksteel Plate's indestructible, and the equipped creature is indestructible. So you're able to wipe the board with Obuun on the battlefield and suit it up with Darksteel Plate. hit some huge board wipe, and then at the beginning of your combat, your lands are creatures and you're swinging through, punching through, getting that damage done. Stonehoof Chieftain is a way that I found when I was researching this deck to make your stuff indestructible as well. Look at it this way: 8 mana for an 8/8, trampling indestructible. Whenever another creature you control attacks, it gains trample and indestructible until end of turn. So with Stonehoof on the battlefield, you swing with Obuun, it gains indestructible, you get all your combat stuff resolved, and then in your second main phase, wipe all the boards. Your Obuun is going to survive, your Stonehoof Chieftain is going to survive, and any other creatures that you swung with that turn are also going to have indestructible and not die from your own board wipe, which is essentially what you want to plan for in a nutshell. Cards like Flawless Maneuver can be played for free if you have your commander on the battlefield, and it gains all your creatures indestructible until end of turn. So you're able to cast this, cast a board wipe, your stuff survives. You get what we're going for at this point. Selfless Spirit, here's another way to do it. Pay 2, sack Selfless Spirit, creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. That's what we want to do. We want to wipe the board, but we want to make sure our stuff is not affected. That's the strong, fun, and mean ways that I would build Obuun, Mul Daya Ancestor. Let's close the book. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Like I said, if you wouldn't mind, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. If you want to support us further, we have a Patreon. The link is down in the description below. Monthly giveaways, lots of behind-the-scenes stuff, access to our Discord, name listed on our videos. You know how it goes. Go check it out and see if you're a good fit. Otherwise, I'm tapped out. Let me know in the comments if you want any other commander to be done 3 ways, and it might show up in a future video. Catch you later.